critical mass dealt, I think, with the burden of the past, and in a way with the reply to Adorno, what kind of art is possible after the Holocaust. This work deals very purposefully with the idea of utopia and the idea of future. And it's called Another Place. And it's absolutely great that this is now permanently sited on 3 square miles of the coastline of the north side of the Mersey estuary, outside Liverpool. There are 100 works based on 17 body positions. They're all standing. There's a shift. These are, in a way, vertical body forms that, for the first time, are not afraid, in a way, of the position of the statue. Not afraid to be, in some senses, testimonial. But they face outwards, out towards the horizon. If we think of the skin as one, in a way, human limit, then we have the horizon, which is maybe a second skin, a perceptual limit to the human world. And we think about the relationship between imagination and the horizon, the perceptual limit. There's a sense in which I think art and sculpture in particular, if you think about the great kind of histories of Egyptian sculpture or even Easter Island, there's a sense in which sculpture as a form of human communication is less important than a form of communication with the unknown, that which lies beyond, as it were, the perceptual limit. Except that this is not romantic. The fact is that we live in a world of mass mobility, both of bodies and goods. And in all of this has been shown 4 times in 4 different locations, and the presence of large ships moving people and goods around the surface of the planet has been very important. This is a working beach. At the south end you can see there is a wind farm, there's scrap heaps, there's the conning tower for the container port, there's this massive great sewage outlet, there's the red flag telling you don't swim because the currents are too steep, and don't even walk out there because the quicksands are fatal. This is the view north, where you can see there's an oil rig just off the coast. It's a very bleak beach, but at the same time, I think the work is about hope. The pieces completely disappear, unlike where it was shown first, where they were an absolutely horizontal plane. This is tipped to follow the slope of the beach. And it means that at high tide, the ones that are furthest out are about 28 feet below the surface of the sea. And in the 2.5 years that they've been there, they've now been colonized by barnacles to a depth of about 3.5 inches and have become very different. These photographs were taken early in the installation. So this idea of, in a sense, these measures, the human measuring of space, linking, in a way, outer space and imagination, linking certainly in its inception, it was about emigration, about the human desire always to find a better life, but somehow thinking of that as being somewhere else, the colonial story, if you like, the New World story, the story here of Australia. At a certain stage, that obsession with spatial coordinates, the edges of things, resulted in an attempt to reformulate the body in terms of organic processes. This is called fruit, this is called earth, oh no, this is called body. And these are both expansions from fetal positions taken from my body. In the same way that colours, if you mix them all together, turn into a kind of whitey grey, all forms, if you continually re-articulate their surfaces, turn into eggs or spheres eventually. And these memories of human bodies that have returned in a way to morphic forms that are closer to cellular bodies are just another way of asking the same question about where the human project fits within the evolution of life. And at a certain point I went the other way. The expansion works finished in the 94, I think 95 I made the last one, and the beginning of the Insider projects. The Insider projects that resulted in Inside Australia started. And this is one of the scans, one of the 110 scans that were taken for the Inside Australia project. This is Ashley de Preza, who was the photographer for the project. We developed a software program that would allow us to identify as it were, the body inside the body. It's not a skeleton. It's not a subtle body in a kind of theosophical sense. It's simply the core of the body, a way of abstracting an inner set or an attitude from the accidents of appearance. And harks back to very early experiments. This is something that I made at art school. It's called First Tree, and it's simply a birch tree that has been carved back to the third year of growth, when it was still a sapling. And you can just see at the bottom the original disc that indicates the size of the trunk when I cut it down. And it was probably a tree of about 30 years old. But that idea of, in a sense, not interpreting something, but trying to find a ore form or a core form, went back to, in a way, full bowl and breadline. And this is a very early one of the Insiders, where I was still thinking about gesture in a way as a kind of semaphore, the semaphore of the body, the lexicon of body positions. But by the time I made Inside Australia, I'd realized that actually standing was the thing. I wanted to think about standing, what standing meant in terms of standing for, but also the act of standing, what it means to be a vertical animal. We are the only animal that chooses to live in boxes. We're also the only animal that has this vertical spine. This was just an indication of how I derived the core originally. I showed you the slide of, as it were, the digital program that we engineered to do this in digital fashion, but up to then I've been doing it mechanically. So here is a body mold taken of me with cross-sections, and every cross-section is very, very carefully analysed and reduced by 66.66% recurring to leave 1/3 of the body mass in one axis. So here we are at Inside Australia. This is Lorraine, one of the Wangutha people who contributed to there was an equal number of indigenous and non-indigenous participants. This was a result of having taken a cyberware scanner to Menzies, the nearest town, to a site that I'd discovered by aerial survey at the west end of Lake Ballard in Western Australia, about 850 kilometres from Perth. We made the work out of minerals that were indigenous to the Archean rock of that region. It's a very, I'm sure you know it better than me, but it's an extraordinary part of the Earth's crust where there's almost a single piece of rock that is 3.5 to 2.9 billion years old, out of which the wealth of Western Australia flows from the super pit to, you know, the increased zinc and tin yields of today. These works were made out of a unique alloy that we invented of molybdenum, iridium, titanium, chromium, vanadium, and steel. So they're, in a sense, a concentrated memory of a moment of the nearest inhabitants' lives and a concentration of the mineral traces within the landscape itself. And then they were displayed in the landscape, a salt lake, 10 square kilometers, very far apart, about 700 meters apart. And the process of, in a way, interpreting the work, rather like walking along the line of bread line, was very physical. And the physical interpretation of the viewers became, in a way, a contributory factor to how the work worked. So there was this drawing of people's passages across. This is actually made at the time of the installation, so you're seeing the tracks of the installers' carts as well as their footprints. But the principle pertains to this day, that anybody leaving a footprint on that salt lake surface leaves a trace that will, you know, last up to a year. So there's this cumulative, in a way, contributory part of the work. And the work is seen in two ways. One is walking, and the other is climbing this mound that allows you to have an access over the whole site, or a kind of visual, a privileged visual view of the whole site. Back to the body, I think from void to solid, expansion to contraction, in a sense there was nowhere else to go but to field function. A field function that might have been in a way indicated in full bowl, the idea of a kind of resonance. So this is feeling material. It's a work that hangs. It has, as it were, the memory of a void body form. This is the first time that I was able to, in a sense, retain both the idea of an apparent void, the place where a body once was, but not enclose it completely. I mean, this is a better solution, maybe, than sense. And this work ended up expanding until it hit the architecture that contained it. And this is actually off its own center of gravity. It's like a kind of tornado. And it was inevitable in the sense that the body would be lost, and that actually, in the end, the idea of using the condition of architecture as it were the starting point to think about a kind of spatial resonance became obvious. And it was in this work, it's the body that you bring in, your own body as a viewer, that becomes the subject of the field function of the work. This is sort of 5 kilometers of continuous half-inch square aluminium tube. How do you combine field function and, in a way, the idea of an indexical presence? This was a dematerialized field. This is called domain field. 287 body forms taken from subjects from the age of 2 to the age of 87, making a field in which you can walk. I don't know how many of you have seen my other field work, I'm not going to show it. But this solved the problem of the field that has a threshold and totally occupies the space that it's in. This invites you to cross over the threshold and become part of the field. It's distributed in the space as if it were molecules of gas in a volume of air, equally distributed. But when it becomes inhabited, I think it becomes something else. And it's the relationship of these, as it were, subtle bodies or evoked body presences and the living bodies that become the subject. Having thought about architecture itself as a form of second body, it seemed obvious that I had to continue the experimentation. This is breathing room. This is seven identical volumes that are stretched in different axes that interlock. We removed all of the lighting, the electronic lighting within the gallery. This is a show in Paris. And the structure, having absorbed light during the day, began to transmit it. So that this space that was, in a way, both a drawing and an object, both a description of architecture and, in some senses, real architecture, became virtualized and floated in the space. But still, people were able to come in and out. And in a sense, this is a, what is it? It's a expression of the field function where, in some senses, the viewer becomes the viewed. The viewer becomes, as it were, the subject in the field of the work. Architecture. Again, this was a very important moment for me, and here in Australia. This is not far from the nuclear testing site. This is a room for the Great Australian Desert. This is minimal architecture. This is a piece of architecture that would precisely enclose my body in a crouching position, placed at the centre of Australia, where there is a 360-degree flat horizon. That same idea of minimal architecture I made later in 1997 in this work called Allotment, which is again 300 individuals from Malmö, southern Sweden, measured, and each one provided with a unique room, and those rooms put together to make a virtual city. That idea about architecture, a reversal of the Vitruvian idea of a city made in the form of man, in a way, the making of a human image in the form of a city, the physicalizing of the pixel, the reference to, in a way, all of the forms of grid that inform our lives, but trying to, in a sense, make a tension between mass and space that talks about the human condition as an internal one, that acknowledges the fact that now over 50% of the human race live within the built environment, and somehow tries to activate that, not as a given, but as a testing ground. These are slides of the show that will open tomorrow at Anna Schwartz's gallery. And I'm very proud to bring this series of works to Australia for the first time. This is the first time that I've made, as it were, a single installation of 7 works that were conceived to be seen together. The show is called Ataxia. And the idea is for there to be an absolute tension between, if you like, the evocation of a human presence and the absolute orthogonal abstraction of the way in which that presence is evoked. These are constructed works. They're not cast. They're made a block at a time. And the language is absolute. It's a rising canon of 6 block sizes, the smallest of which is half an inch by half an inch by an inch, and the largest of which is 4 by 4 by 8. And there is an implicate order in these works that I hope is transmitted across all 7, where there is an absolute logic to the position of every block, but every block in some senses is a subjective interpretation of a subjective condition. It's important to me that there is continually this tension between their abstraction and their reference, in a way, to the urban condition of humanity, and the fact that they actually derive from a registration of a lived physical moment. I just wanted to end with 2 last images of a show that is presently both in Kiev in the Ukraine and in New York. This is called Blind Light, and it's really, I suppose, the most immaterial of any of the works that I've made. This is really, the materials are light and water. This is a room 40 foot by 30 foot, filled with 7,000 lux daylight calibrated fluorescent light and 100% humidity at 1.5 atmospheres. You might be able to see that there's a human being passing across that threshold, a threshold that is continually open. He or she will disappear both to themselves and to the rest of us once they pass over that threshold. And what happens is that that intermission that was within full bowl of a continuity between content and context, between the idea of consciousness and its extension in space as a continuum, perhaps was most fully realized in this work, in which all those questions about who art can be for, where it can be found, and who can be represented in it, coalesce in a situation where the viewer becomes the viewed. Thank you very much.